Trish Millines-Dziko has always been a pioneer. She studied computer science in the late 70s, well before that degree came into fashion. She joined Microsoft before that tech giant went supernova in the mid-90s. Now she's leading the charge for teaching science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, education in the Pacific Northwest. She even started her own school with remarkable results. As the founder of the Technology Access Foundation, Trish Millines-Dziko is ahead of her time. That's why she joins our exclusive list of the innovators. I'm Hanson Hosein. Welcome to 4 Peaks. Trish Millines-Dziko from Taft Technology Access Fund. Welcome, Foundation.
Thank you.
So it strikes me that you've always been ahead of your time. That, from the time that you decided to go to computer science, you joined Microsoft, as I said in the introduction. Now there's all this conversation around STEM education, but you were there years before. How does it feel to finally be redeemed?
Oh, it's pretty amazing, actually, when you think about how important STEM education is and the fact that students of color are now ahead. We just need to get more of them there at this point.
When you say students of color are now ahead of whom?
The whole STEM movement, so we focus on students of color and low-income students in STEM, and for once they're actually getting ahead of the boom. When we first started in '96, the kids were behind, and that's why we started. And we focused mostly on technology. And the idea was to get them to be inventors and creators of technology. And we were able to accomplish that and move very quickly into the full STEM spectrum. And now what you're seeing is at least the Taft students are ahead of the game. And we'd like to see more Taft students ahead of the game.
And why did you identify that particular issue or element as something that required advancement in that particular demographic group?
Well, so when you look at all the STEM fields, people of color are not represented, particularly African Americans and Latinos. And when you start to look at things like where it's really important, research science, and we start talking about health issues, there's very little research going on for people of color and the conditions that we suffer from. So in order to change that, you need people who are interested. And who's going to be interested? People of color themselves, right? So you need that great background in science, you need it in technology, you need to be able to solve problems, be critical thinkers, and really be interested in your community and what's going on in your community in order to pursue that type of field. So we give kids opportunities to do that, and we're starting to see the fruits of the labor now.
We know that STEM has become a huge topic here in Washington State, ranked so low in the country when it comes to STEM education. And we know that Boeing and Microsoft are suddenly throwing money at it because they think this is something that has to be addressed for the workforce of the future, the workforce of now. Back in '96, I don't think a lot of people were talking about this. This might have been just an after-school program for you. What was it like being that voice when nobody else was really paying attention?
Well, actually, '96, the biggest challenge we had was getting kids to see that this is something they wanted to do. So our first class, we started the program after a year of planning in October '97, and we had to beg kids to come to the program. So we started with 32 kids, and 27 finished, and 27 got internships. And from that point on, we had a wait list. And that was during the dot-com boom. It was the beginning of the boom. So we didn't have any problems getting corporations interested. It's when the bust happened that we really started to have challenges. And what we did was we had such a great product that companies, instead of hiring one kid, would hire 2 or 3. So it made up for the companies that went out of business and dropped off. But now what we're starting to see is there's this interest in STEM, but not the understanding of what it takes to marry the academic environment with the corporate environment. And that's the work that we do.
Well, that's interesting. So recently you co-founded, I guess, this school.
Yes.
In Federal Way, and it's unique in the fact that it's a public-private partnership. You got a nonprofit basically working with these companies to do that. I'm just going to show a little video from Taft Academy, and you've been very successful out of the gate. I think very recently you graduated your first class, and a lot of them got to go to their college of first choice. So why do you still think you face a challenge if you're being so successful at this level?
As I was talking to someone earlier, it's that you're never a prophet in your own land, right? We like
prophet,
to believe
P-H-E-T, you mean?
Yeah. It's like, we really think we're so innovative here, but we are when it comes to companies, but when you start talking about education, we don't support our own innovation. And so that's one of the challenges I see. Like, we're a very successful model, but people want the easy way out. This is not an easy model to do, because regardless of whether it's a public-private partnership or not, you still have to pay attention to kids, and you have to pay attention to each and every individual child, and that's a high-touch industry. And I think we're looking for those solutions around the so-called achievement gap and things like that, and their distractions from the actual work that needs to get done.
So you're saying, on one hand, we're looking at the corporate side, then we're looking separately at the education side. What do you really need to see happen now for the connection to be successful for you? Well,
in terms of a STEM education, and really any type of education, you need industry to be connected to schools. So for instance, the thing we have is a teacher-scientist partnership program where we have STEM professionals coming on the campus every day. Sometimes they teach, sometimes they help evaluate projects, sometimes they help the kids with data from the projects. They're involved with what's going on in the school. They're not giving us money and then walking away. They're not coming in for a little field trip and then walking away. They are deeply involved, and that's really what it takes. And we have the model to do that, and it's really been beneficial for our kids. So when they go out on the internship, they know the people who they're interning for, because those people worked on the campus with them, and those people worked on their projects with them. So they already have that kind of relationship, and it makes their internship more successful, and it brings it back to the classroom, and they see why it is they're learning.
So this sounds utterly awesome. But it's just one school in this vast wilderness of a school system that some say is kind of broken. I mean, it sounds like we want to have one of these schools in every possible community, not just in Federal Way.
Absolutely, and we're in the position actually to help start other schools if people want to do the same thing, and to also start schools ourselves. The thing we need is the support, the financial support to do it, because in our state we're so low funded. We're 42nd in the nation in per student funding. So for instance, in Federal Way, we get $4,852 per kid from the state, which is like nothing when you think about it. You look at other states, they get, $10,000, $15,000 per kid. So if you double the number from the state, then I think more schools could do what we're doing. As it is, we have to raise money to add on to what it takes to educate kids properly.
Including getting money from corporations.
Including getting money from corporations.
Which for some is kind of an uncomfortable alliance sometimes.
But if they want STEM professionals, at the end of the day, they have to make the investment in K through 12. They can't wait to go to the colleges and recruit, because there won't be enough kids there to recruit from.
Well, we're going to talk more about what has motivated you in your personal story to do some of this work. We'll return back with Four Peaks with Trish Millines-Dziko. Right back. We're back with Trish Millines-Dziko from the Technology Access Foundation. Trish, I find your personal story so compelling. You found it somehow. You found the wisdom in the 70s when everybody else seemed to be having a good time to go get, you put yourself through college, right? And not only did that, but computer science. What on earth went on in your head that said this is the thing to do?
Well, actually, my original major was EE, electrical engineering. And because I was good at math and I wanted to do something besides be a teacher. But I went to school on a basketball scholarship. It was the only way I could afford to go. The labs were the same time as basketball practice, so I needed another major that was comparable. I picked computer science because the labs were open all night, and you can get your work done at any time of the day. It was convenience, really, convenience and practicality, yeah.
That's great. And so once you got into it, though, did you feel like you were a natural at computer science?
Yeah, I really liked it. I think it was pretty good. If I had to do it all over again, I'd be a much better student. I had a lot of distractions. I was on my own. My mom had died that May before I graduated high school, so that all that was going on while I was trying to start a college career. So by my junior and senior year, I finally kind of clicked and realized that this is what I need to do.
So at that time, your iPhone must have been as big as your card.
Oh,
what kind of technology were you playing with back
then? I had punch cards. Punch cards is what we used, and the tape was a big deal, right? So there was a couple of kids that got a chance to use the paper tape, but we used the punch cards, and the computer we used was at Rutgers. So we didn't even have our own computer. We just had a terminal. So you punch out your punch cards, and sometimes the deck would be like 300 cards long. You put them in the reader, you put the rubber band around your deck, and then you wait another day for the printout to come so you can fix your program, right? So it took a long time, a whole semester to get one single program done.
Yeah, I learned on Fortran and COBOL and the same
Yes,
punch cards
exactly.
a long time ago.
Yeah,
But this was
yeah.
before Revenge of the Nerds. There was no sense then that you were going to become a master of the universe along with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs.
I was just trying to get a job. You know, I was trying to get a major where I can get a really good job, and I did, and it tended, you know, it worked out.
Did I read somewhere that you actually you made a career move along the way that you ended up having to live out of your car for a while?
Yeah.
What happened there?
It's just stupid mistakes. Thinking that during a recession that I can just move somewhere because I have a computer science background and get a job, and it just didn't work out. And so I look at that and I just say, you know, it was a lesson learned. I never did it again, right? And it's just one of those things where I was very thankful that I really had a set of skills that I can fall back on. And I look at other people who were in that situation and really didn't have those type of skills.
So how'd you get from living in your car to the front door of a nascent Microsoft?
Well, I ended up, so I was in San Francisco. I ended up getting a job with a company called Fortune Systems. And that's where I found my career in micros, because they had a Unix desktop. And it was the first time I had full control over a machine, because prior to that, I worked on mainframes. Right. And I really fell in love with this notion that I can control the operating system. We had the internet then, but it was just email back and forth, right? But just this notion that I had complete control. And then, you know, I had a background in testing, software testing, so I really learned a lot during that process. So by the time I moved up to Seattle, I worked for a small company called Fortune Systems, and it was the first time, or Telecalc, sorry. It was the first time that I actually used the IBM machine and used DOS.
So you got a job at Microsoft when it was still a small company.
Yes.
Working in computers, but somewhere along the way you decided to actually make a switch, almost not to HR, but into diversity. Why did you do that? Why did you leave the hard skill job for something a little bit softer and policy-oriented or HR-oriented?
Well, while I was at Microsoft the first few years, I spent some time going on recruiting trips, trying to get more people of color into the industry and into the company specifically. And eventually I got to this point where I said, you know, I like doing what I'm doing, but I really want to spend some time figuring out if I can crack this diversity nut. And being at Microsoft, they allowed me to change my career, which is pretty amazing because most companies wouldn't let you do that. And I ended up being the first senior diversity administrator for the company. And my whole focus was on building the pipeline and making sure that once employees got there, that they stayed. It was a good move for me, not so much a good move for the company because they lost a technical person who was a woman and a person of color, so that didn't do so well for their diversity stat.
Well, I want to talk to you when we get back from our break about being a person of color and a woman in a fairly male, white-dominated world. So I think after the break we'll talk to Trish Millines-Dziko exactly about that. We'll be right back. And we're back with Trish Millines-Dziko from the Technology Access Foundation. Trish, you've been a pioneer in this region since you got here with Microsoft, and it led the way in terms of diversity, especially in the technology field. For you personally, what has it been like as a woman of color, both as a woman and a person of color, in this very sort of monochromatic field?
It's lonely. You know, when you think about the generation I grew up in, we make our friends at work, right? And so when you think about being in the industry that I'm in, that I was in, there aren't many people who look like me, who have experiences that we can share. So it was really a challenge in some ways socially. But there's the other part of it where work-wise, always having to prove myself over and over and over again, and doing the work twice as hard and twice as good as my counterparts. After a while, they got exhausting. And when we talk to our kids about that, I share that with them because I need them to understand that it's going to be the same for them because things haven't changed that much. I think when they get into their 30s, they'll start to see the change because they'll start to see more people like them. But as long as there are people in my generation that are controlling companies, that are in management positions, they're going to have that same challenge.
But you would think that given all the diversity initiatives you're seeing in progressive companies like Microsoft, that at least from a numbers point of view, people of color are greatly valued. I mean, they didn't quite like the fact they were losing you on the computer side because you're going to the diversity side.
But I think it really depends on what happens in the office. Much like I say in the classroom, you know, you could talk about all the great things that happen in a school, but for kids on the individual level, when they're in that classroom with the teachers, that's what you need to be looking at. And it's the same thing when you're talking about working in a company. Yeah, the numbers may be good, but when you start to look at who's in management, right, and who's in your group, then you start to see, you know, the numbers aren't that great and they don't mean that much. It's really about the personal experience. And as long as people aren't watching the personal experience, you're going to have some of those challenges.
So in Seattle, which has one of the most diverse zip codes in the nation, why is diversity still a challenge in these professional environments?
You know, I think some of it is because you don't have critical mass. You don't have, you know, we started getting critical mass of women in some of the STEM industries, but we've never had critical mass of African Americans or Latinos. We have a critical mass of Asians, but when you start to look at management in large companies, they don't exist at that level, right? So it's really about having enough mass at each level of the ladder to really make a difference to bring people up in the companies.
So what led you to walk away from your prestigious, well-paying job at a tech giant and start a nonprofit?
Oh, craziness. No, when I thought about it, you know, it took a year or so to really think about it. And at that time, I said, this is worth the risk, because if things don't work out, I can always come back. And, you know, 17 years later, I haven't gone back.
Why was it so important to you to do that? That sounds like you were really following your heart, that you felt like something had to be fixed and you were the one to fix it.
Well, I saw the industry changing, right? So when I started, only businesses government and some businesses use technology, right? And then over time, it was all businesses using technology. Then the universities were using it. And then it started leaking into the K-12 system. But kids who look like me weren't getting access still, right? And so what I saw was the writing on the wall that there'll be even fewer people than me getting into these industries if we don't do something. You know, my time going out to the colleges trying to recruit really told me that we had a problem, a pipeline problem. And I felt like it was important to do it at that moment, otherwise it wouldn't get done.
And so now that you've been, seems to be very successful, what are you hearing from the folks on the other side of the pipeline who are receiving your recruits that you've sent them their way?
Well, I would say even from day one, when our kids were just interns at some of these companies, they said they were the most well-prepared, conscientious kids that they had seen. So they were competing sometimes against college kids when they were in high school. But they knew how to ask for work when they could see that the work was running out. They knew how to dress, they knew how to behave, they knew how to speak properly to people, get the work done, ask for help when they needed it. And that was all because of the training that we gave them. We also gave the corporations training around how do you work with these kids. They're going to be teenagers. They're going to be probably the only people of color in your company, and these are the things we need you to do with them. You can't give them make work, busy work. You have to give them challenging work.
Yeah, I think when we come back, I want to talk to you about how you actually bring those corporations into the conversation and the partnership. So we'll be right back for 4 Peaks.
Four Peaks is made possible by generous support from the Museum of History and Industry and from Weber Shandwick.
We're talking technology and diversity with Trish Millines-Dziko of the Technology Access Foundation. Trish, you've managed to partner with Boeing and Microsoft to fund the TAF Academy. I think Intel recently recognized your school as the top middle school in the United States for math instruction. What's been your strategy for roping these companies into a partnership?
Well, I think it's starting at the bottom, starting with the employees and really getting them engaged in the school or any of our other programs. And then once they get engaged, then they start to talk to their managers and start to talk to their company about what a great program this is. And then when we apply the funding, then it becomes this thing that their staff has already been involved in. I think the other piece is having them recognize that since they've hired interns, that they see the value of what we do, and if they want to see more of it, we need them to contribute economically.
I mean, it's amazing. It feels like, I mean, given where you started, you had this vision, and now years later we're here where everybody's talking about this, and you've got these major companies involved. Success seems to me to be assured. Job done. Go home.
Oh, no. No, no, no. We have a long way to go. So I look at our model, and I think it's a great model, but we're always trying to improve. But when you start to look at the broader picture, we need to look at adaptive behavior among adults. You know, everybody from families and communities to the schools, that we need to make sure that all the adults are doing the job they need to do, because when we do our job, kids will be successful. We need to create environments in our schools where kids can be successful, where they can be in charge of their own learning, where teachers are actually learning. You know, we're still teaching that 1950s model where kids sit in cemetery rows and the teacher's in front as the vessel of all information. It's like, we can't do that anymore.
That's changing. We know that's changing
That's
very quickly.
changing, but it's not changing in my community. And that's the thing that's important. We needed to change. We have schools that are still set up in that disciplinary way where, you know, it's that punishment instead of the asset base. It's more about, you know, you're not behaving, you're not doing this, so therefore I'm going to take away, instead of giving them that fertile ground to really play and learn in. And that's why our model works, because we let the kids guide the learning, and the adults are about creating the environment.
And it sounds like you're on your way to success then, instead of declaring success. Very briefly, if you weren't doing this, if you were free of all other obligations, what would you be doing?
Oh, I'd be gardening. I'd be gardening. I would be teaching kids how to grow their own food, how to live off the land, and you know, have their own chickens and things like that.
You know, either way, it sounds like you're engaged in worthy endeavors. So
Yes.
I'm grateful for your existence in terms of what you pursue and what matters to you. So Trish Millines-Dziko, tech pioneer and founder of the Technology Access Foundation, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very
I think your work is really important. And we invite you all to extend your reach by connecting with us at 4peaks.org. I'm Hanson Hosein.
Production of 4 Peaks would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors.